Thaddeus Crane had lived in silence for 12 long years. Solitude had become his religion, his days marked by the lowing of cattle, the whistle of wind through cracked wooden fences, and the creak of his porch swing beneath him. He needed nothing and no one, but that morning shattered it all. He just stepped outside, coffee steaming in his hand, when he saw her. She was pressed against his fence, bare as the day she was born, arms gripping the weather-worn wood like a drowning woman clinging to driftwood. Her sobs echoed over the frost-hardened ground, desperate and raw. Mud streaked her arms and legs. Blood oozed from her scraped knees and torn palms. Her long black hair hung in wild snarls, tangled with leaves and thorns. She shook violently, not from the cold, but from terror. Thaddeus froze. The mug trembled in his hand. For one long heartbeat, he considered turning away, closing the door, going back inside to let the world figure itself out without him. After Martha died and the town made him a pariah for grieving the wrong way he'd made a vow. No more people, no more drama, just cattle, wind, and time. But this wasn't someone demanding something from him. She hadn't come knocking. She was broken, lost, holding onto his fence like it was her last hope. That he set the coffee down. His boots crunched the frozen grass as he crossed the yard. She didn't hear him at first, too swallowed by panic to notice. But when she finally lifted her head, he saw the kind of fear that didn't come from imagination, it came from survival. "Please," she whispered. Her voice was sandpaper and splinters. "Don't let them find me." He felt it like a blow to the chest. "Who?" he asked, his voice gentle, though his gut was already roiling with something dark. She shook her head frantically. "I can't. If they find me, they'll kill me. They'll kill us both." He searched her eyes for signs of deceit, some trick, some angle. All he found was pure, bone-deep terror. Everything inside him screamed to stay out of it. But he couldn't. Not this time. "What's your name?" "Magnolia." "I'm Thaddeus," he said. "Come inside. We'll figure this out." He slipped his coat from his shoulders and draped it around her, guiding her trembling body toward the house. But as he helped her up the steps, he saw movement on the ridge. 3 riders, approaching fast. Dust clouds kicked up behind them like smoke from hell. He slammed the door behind them and moved to the window, peering out through a sliver in the curtain. The riders were still a ways off, but they were closing the distance quick. Magnolia stood in the center of his cabin like a wild creature cornered by fire, eyes flicking to every shadow. "They're coming, aren't they?" she asked, her voice barely there. He gave a single nod. 3 of them, Colt DeVellin's men, she said. "He owns the saloon in Copper Ridge, owns half the damn town." Her voice cracked. "He bought me from my husband's debts. Said I belong to him now." Thaddeus's jaw tightened. He'd heard stories about men like DeVellin, vultures who fed on desperation, who used contracts and coin to justify their cruelty. But hearing it in her voice, seeing her shame, made it something else, something personal. "You got away," she nodded slowly. "Last night, Colt was going to share me with his business partners, part of some sick deal. I broke a window and ran. Been running ever since." Thaddeus didn't hesitate. He reached up above the fireplace and pulled down the rifle he hadn't used in years. 6 bullets. 3 men, not great odds, but they'd have to do. "There's a root cellar under the kitchen," he told her, pointing to the rug. "Get down there. Don't come out until it's over." She grabbed his arm. "They'll kill you." "Maybe," he said, calm washing over him like cold water. "But they're not taking you back." The hoof beats grew louder, closer. He could feel them in his bones. Magnolia slipped into the trapdoor as he dragged a cabinet over it, hiding the entrance. Then he stepped to the window, rifle raised, breath slow. He thought of Martha, of the quiet life he'd built in her memory, of the promise he'd made to never involve himself in anyone else's pain again. But maybe that promise had outlived its usefulness. The 3 riders pulled up hard outside. Their horses snorted and stamped the earth. The man in the center dismounted with the easy confidence of a wolf in a chicken coop. Cold eyes, a black vest, a face like it had been carved from stone. "Morning," the man called. "Name's Pike. We're looking for someone." Thaddeus stepped onto the porch, rifle held easy at his side but ready. "Lots of people pass through. You'll have to be more specific." Pike smiled. It was not a kind smile. Dark-haired girl. Young, might not have been wearin' much. Her tracks led straight to your fence. He tilted his head toward the porch rail, where two coffee cups sat side by side. Thaddeus didn't flinch. Tracks can lie, he said evenly. Especially after the rain we had last night. Pike's eyes narrowed. There'd been no rain, and they both knew it. But this was the game, the script. Pretend civility before blood hit the dirt. Mind if we take a look around? Pike asked. Too polite to be anything but a threat. I do mind. This is private land. The other two men shifted in their saddles, hands brushing their holsters. Thaddeus saw it coming. This wasn't their first time running a shakedown. Pike stepped closer, pulling a folded paper from his vest. Warrant. Search for stolen property. Official business. It was a lie, and Thaddeus knew it. But in a town like Copper Ridge, men like Devellin didn't need real laws. They wrote their own. Stolen property? He asked, voice tight. Girl owes Colt for services, Pike said with a grin. Couple thousand worth. Plus she busted his window. That's destruction and assault. The rage simmering in Thaddeus's gut finally broke through his ribs and settled in his bones. I don't see no girl here, he said. And if I did, I'd say she wasn't property. She's a person, one that doesn't belong to any man, debt or no debt. The porch creaked under his boots as he squared his shoulders. You've got 3 seconds to ride off before I stop pretending this is a conversation. Pike's smile faded. For a second, the only sound was the wind and the horses shifting. Uneasily. Then the standoff cracked like a lightning bolt. And Thaddeus Crane, who had spent 12 years avoiding trouble, braced himself to meet it head-on. Thaddeus's blood boiled. The way these men talked about Magnolia as if she were livestock. Her pain just a line item in some vile business deal was more than he could stomach. He thought of her trembling eyes, the blood caked on her knees, from crawling through brush and stone just to reach his fence. Services, he echoed, voice flat. Pike's grin stretched wider, shark-like. Now you're catching on. So step aside and let us collect what's ours. No need to make this messy. Thaddeus lifted his rifle, steady and sure. Here's what's going to happen, he said. You're going to get back on your horses. You're going to ride out, and you're not going to come back. The mounted men reached for their guns in the same breath, but Thaddeus was faster. The first shot punched through the rider on the left before his weapon even cleared its holster. The second caught the other in the shoulder, spinning him sideways in the saddle and sending his gun clattering to the ground. Pike dove behind his horse, yanking out his pistol. You just made the biggest mistake of your life, old man. Gunfire exploded. Bullets tore into the wooden porch posts, sending splinters across Thaddeus's face as he rolled behind the water trough. For rounds left, Pike was still alive, still dangerous, and Thaddeus had no clue how many more men might be riding in. Then he heard her Magnolia's soft sobs rising from beneath the trapdoor. That sound gave him clarity. This wasn't just a shootout. It was a stand, a war for her freedom, one that, come hell or blood, would end today. Pike's horse bucked and bolted, leaving him exposed. The enforcer dashed toward the overturned wagon beside the barn, bullets snapping at his heels as Thaddeus fired. The wounded man groaned on the ground, hand pressed against his mangled shoulder. His companion lay still, glassy eyes staring at the pale morning sky. This ain't over. Pike shouted from cover. Devlin's got 20 men. You think you can take them all? He wasn't wrong. Even if Thaddeus survived this moment, Devlin wouldn't let it stand. Not the insult, not the loss, especially not over a woman he believed he owned. Thaddeus glanced toward the cellar door. Magnolia was down there, fragile seconds ago. But now, he felt that there was steel under the surface. The time for backing down had long passed. Then he better bring all 20, Thaddeus barked. Another flurry of shots erupted, wood splintering near his head, but Pike was pinned. They both knew it. The real question now was, who'd run out of ammo first? Then a soft creak behind him. Don't, Thaddeus warned without turning. Stay hidden. But her voice was different now, clearer, solid. The wounded one. She said, I know him. Thaddeus risked a glance. Magnolia stood at the trapdoor, wrapped in one of his shirts. Her face had changed. The fear was still there, yes, but it had calcified into something cold. That's Ezra Kane, she said. He was there, the night Colt. She choked, unable to finish. She didn't have to. He held me down while Colt explained what I owed. Ezra was crawling toward his pistol now, blood dark on his fingers, still dangerous. Thaddeus's gaze flit between him and Pike. He couldn't cover them both. What would you do? Trust Magnolia to handle Ezra, or protect her and face both threats alone? Thaddeus made his choice. He slid a small pistol across the floor to her. You know how to use it. Her hands trembled as she picked it up, but her voice was granite. Colt made sure I did, she said. Said a woman should know how to protect his investment. That was when Pike made his move. He bolted from the wagon, gun blazing. Thaddeus swung his rifle, but Pike was quick, reckless, and furious. The shot went wide. Thaddeus ducked as lead whined past, then a crack behind him. Ezra's voice rose in panic. Wait, Magnolia, please. A single shot answered him. Deafening in the silence, Thaddeus turned. Ezra lay still. Magnolia stood over him, pistol in hand, tears carving down her face. That's for Sarah, she whispered. And Mary. And all the others. Pike roared. You killed Ezra. Devlin's gonna skin you both alive. But something had shifted. The tremble in Magnolia was gone. She wasn't the woman who stumbled to the fence anymore. She was something new, something sharpened. Pike charged again, shooting wildly. Thaddeus raised his rifle, fired once. The bullet caught Pike square in the chest. The enforcer dropped, dead before he hit the dirt, but not before his last round struck Thaddeus's left arm. Fire tearing through muscle and bone. Silence slammed down like thunder. 3 corpses bled into his land, the land he'd kept quiet and untouched for 12 long years. Thaddeus pressed a hand to his wound. Warm blood soaked through his shirt. You're hurt, Magnolia said, dropping beside him. It's nothing, he muttered, though the edges of the world were starting to dim. We've got to move. Pike wasn't bluffing. Devlin's men will come. She tore strips from his shirt, binding the wound tight. I've done this before, she said. Colt's girls. We looked after each other when we could. As she worked, he studied her. The terrified, broken girl who'd clung to his fence in desperation was gone. In her place stood someone forged in fire, scarred but unbroken. She hadn't just escaped. She had survived. And now she was ready to fight. Should have unsettled him, but strangely, it didn't. Instead, Thaddeus felt something he hadn't felt in years, real respect for another human being. There's more, Magnolia said, her hand halting on the bandage she was wrapping. Pike mentioned 20 men, but that's not the worst of it. Devlin doesn't just own the saloon, he's tied to the railroad company. They've been quietly buying up land in this valley for a new line. Thaddeus felt the words land like a punch to the gut. This land, she nodded gravely. Your ranch is right in the path of their expansion. You're sitting on the heart of the route. They've been pushing people out for months, but nobody would sell, so Devlin started leaning harder. The others dead, run off, or scared silent. You're the last holdout, Thaddeus. Her eyes met his, green and apologetic. They were probably coming for you anyway. I just gave them an excuse to do it today. And just like that, the full picture snapped into place. This wasn't about recovering stolen property. This was about power, about land. Devlin had orchestrated all of it, using Magnolia's escape as the spark for something already set in motion. Now Thaddeus understood the fake warrant, Pike's arrogant swagger, the railroad, the sudden aggression, the calculated pressure. It was all connected. How long before Devlin shows with the rest of his crew? He asked. Magnolia glanced up at the sinking sun. 2, maybe 3 hours. Pike was supposed to signal once he found me. Thaddeus looked around the cabin, his home, his history. Every board, every fence post, every tool hanging on the wall had cost him sweat, blood, and years of solitude. This was the last thing he had left of Martha. His entire identity was carved into this land. Now he stood at a crossroads. Run, abandon it all, and vanish. Or stay and face 20 hired guns with a wounded arm and a woman who'd already risked everything just by knocking on his door. But as if the land had already made the decision for him. The sound of distant hoof beats reached his ears quick, sharp, drawing closer. He turned toward the noise, lifted his rifle scope, and froze. 8 riders. Not coming from the Copper Ridge direction. They were heading in fast from the east. Cavalry. He lowered the scope, jaw tightening. Cavalry, he muttered. Magnolia's face paled instantly. God, Colt must have sent word to Fort Henderson. Told them I'm some fugitive or Indian sympathizer or worse. Thaddeus lowered the rifle. He could shoot at thugs and land. Grabbers, but firing at federal soldiers. That was treason. These men might be acting on lies, but they wore the uniform of the United States Army. What do we do? Magnolia whispered. Before he could answer, the soldiers fanned out in a practiced semicircle, surrounding the ranch. Their leader rode forward, a young lieutenant with sharp eyes and a hand resting casually on his saber. The others remained, mounted, cavalry carbines ready. I'm Lieutenant Morrison, he called out. We've received reports that a federal fugitive is being harbored on this property. Escaped criminal, theft, and assault. Thaddeus stepped onto his porch, his boots heavy against the boards. What's the name? Magnolia Hayes, the officer answered. Also goes by Magnolia Devlin. The lie was delivered with such precision that Thaddeus almost second-guessed the truth himself. Devlin had sealed every angle, turning corruption into federal decree. Now Magnolia wasn't just fleeing criminals. She was running from the entire system. Can't help you, Thaddeus said evenly. Ain't seen anyone by that name. Morrison's eyes moved across the yard, landing on the 3 dead men sprawled in the dust. Seems like you've had some excitement, Mr. Crane. Thaddeus Crane, he said without flinching. Those men tried to rob me. I defended my property. 3 against 1, Morrison noted. Dismounting slowly, his fingers curled around the hilt of his saber. That's some fine shooting, Mr. Crane. He gestured to his men. Mind if we have a look around? Routine search, fugitive investigations and all. Thaddeus knew the game. Say no, and he confirmed suspicion. Say yes, and they'd find Magnolia and drag her away in shackles toward a courtroom that was already bought and sold, of course, he said. Though I should warn you, I live alone. Have for years. Morrison gave a short nod, and for soldiers dismounted, spreading toward the barn and outbuildings. It would only be a matter of minutes before someone stumbled on the trapdoor, leading down to the cellar. Inside, Magnolia pressed herself against the wall near the door, her breathing shallow. Thaddeus could see her from where he stood, gripping the pistol like it was the only thing tethering her to this world. One wrong move, and she'd be gunned down before a word left her mouth. Tell me about these men, Morrison said casually, nudging Pike's lifeless body with his boot. You recognize them, drifters, Thaddeus said coolly. Said they were looking for work, but it was all a setup. They were sizing up the place for a robbery. Interesting, Morrison said, voice light, almost amused. Because we got word from, but whatever else he meant to say was cut short as the men reached the barn, and the trapdoor creaked open beneath one of their boots. Copper Ridge had whispered that 3 of Colt Devlin's men had ridden toward Thaddeus Crane's ranch that morning and hadn't returned. Morrison didn't need confirmation. He already knew who those dead men were, and more importantly, why they'd come. The so-called federal warrant. Just window dressing, a lie to make Devlin's vengeance look like justice. A shout rang out from inside the cabin. Lieutenant, found something. Morrison's thin smile returned, cold and sharp. Well, Mr. Crane, he said, looks like your story just unraveled. One of the soldiers stepped out holding a shirt, Thaddeus's shirt. Magnolia had been wearing it the night she bandaged his wound. The fabric was stained with fresh blood. Morrison inspected it like a man inspecting a winning hand at poker. Still wet, the soldier reported. There's a trapdoor in the kitchen too. Someone's been hiding there. Morrison's eyes drilled into Thaddeus. So where is she now? Thaddeus's mind raced. The cellar was empty. Magnolia had vanished during the search. But there were no trees, no cover for miles, unless the old mine shaft. Martha had shown it to him years ago. A crumbling vein of silver tucked into the rocky bluff behind the barn. Half collapsed, riddled with snakes, but it would hide her. I told you, Thaddeus said flatly. I live alone. Morrison struck him hard across the face, the blow sudden and cruel. Don't make this worse than it has to be. Harboring a fugitive gets you a noose. Blood slid down Thaddeus's lip, but his eyes never flinched. Then you'd better find your fugitive. A rifle cracked from the rocks. One of Morrison's men went down, yelling and clutching his leg. She's in the ridge, someone shouted. The soldiers scattered for cover as Magnolia's bullets stitched the air. Morrison drew his saber and pressed it against Thaddeus's throat. Call her out, or I'll get you right here. But Thaddeus only smiled. Magnolia wasn't just hiding, she was fighting. She had the high ground, multiple exits, a view of the whole field. She was thinking like a soldier now. Another shot. Closer. A soldier ducked behind a water trough, cursing. She was on the move, dancing through the mine's dark veins, staying one step ahead. She's got the advantage, Thaddeus said calmly. She knows this land better than any of your men. You willing to bleed for Colt DeVelon's bounty? Morrison's face reddened. This is about the law. No, Thaddeus said. This is about a railroad and a corrupt bastard who bought you. The saber dug deeper into his neck, blood purling at the edge, but Morrison's hand was shaking. The mask of federal authority was slipping, revealing the hired gun underneath from the rocks. Magnolia's voice rang out clear, unafraid. I've got 6 shots left and all day to use them. How bad do you want me, Lieutenant? The soldiers were rattled now, crouching behind troughs and wagons. Their whelpland raid had turned into a standoff. One of them whispered, "She's playing with us." Morrison gritted his teeth and hissed, "Call her down, or Lieutenant Morrison." A new voice, stern, from behind. Morrison turned and froze. A man in a colonel's uniform rode hard toward the ranch. Morrison's face drained of color. "Colonel Hartwell," he stammered, lowering the blade. The colonel dismounted, eyes scanning. The chaos-wounded soldiers, gunfire in the rocks, and a saber to a rancher's throat. "What in God's name is going on here, Lieutenant?" "Sir, we're pursuing a federal fugitive. Our intelligence from Copper Ridge, from Colt DeVelon." "You mean?" Hartwell's tone was glacial. "Did you think I wouldn't learn about your little deal with that snake?" Morrison floundered. "Sir, I'm talking about the $2,000 in railroad money found in your quarters, the fake warrants, the abuse of federal authority." Hartwell stepped closer. "You turned my soldiers into thugs for hire. You thought I wouldn't notice?" From the rocks, Magnolia called out, voice tight with disbelief. "Colonel, are you here to arrest me too?" "No," Miss Hartwell said, his voice cutting through the tension. "I'm here to arrest the men who used my uniform to terrorize civilians." Relief hit Thaddeus like a wave. But even more powerful was the sound from the rocks, a strangled sob that broke into a laugh. The sound of a woman realizing she didn't have to run anymore. Morrison made one last desperate move for his pistol. Thaddeus kicked it aside and drove a fist into his jaw. 12 years of silence and fury went into that punch. "That's for Martha," he said, "and every woman DeVelon's ever hurt." 20 minutes later, Magnolia came down from the ridge. Her rifle hung from her shoulder, and tears painted her cheeks. She fell into Thaddeus's arms, trembling with the weight of freedom. "It's over," he whispered into her hair. "You're safe." Colonel Hartwell arrested Morrison and 3 of his officers for corruption and abuse. The rest were reassigned. They'd believed the lies, followed orders they didn't question. The very next day, federal marshals stormed Copper Ridge and hauled Colt DeVelon away in shackles. 6 months later, the sun dipped low behind the mountains, casting golden light over the valley. On the porch of a rebuilt cabin, Thaddeus and Magnolia stood side by side. She wore a simple white dress. He wore his best shirt. A preacher from the next county had just pronounced them husband and wife. "No more running," she said, her fingers laced in his. "No more hiding." He agreed. The railroad never did lay tracks through the valley. The surveyor's reports, it turned out, had been full of lies meant to drive up the price. But none of that mattered now. Thaddeus and Magnolia had found something more valuable than land, silver, or bribes. They had found each other.